I never thought silence could feel so heavy. The kind that fills every corner of a house, seeping into walls and resting quietly on furniture that hasn't been touched in days. My husband, Richard, often said our home was too still. But he didn't understand it wasn't the house that was silent. It was me. When his daughter, Emily, stopped visiting 3 years ago, I told myself it didn't matter. She was an adult now, busy with her own life. Maybe she didn't have time for weekend visits anymore, or maybe she simply wanted distance. That's what I told myself anyway. But deep down, I knew the truth. She didn't want to see me. Started the day of our wedding. Emily had been polite, too polite. Kind of politeness that hides resentment beneath a practiced smile. She stood beside her father as we exchanged vows, but her eyes never met mine. I tried, truly I did, to reach out. I cooked her favorite meals when she visited, remembered her birthday, even framed a photo of her and Richard in the living room. But her walls were built high, and every attempt I made only seemed to strengthen them. Sometimes I'd hear her laughter through the phone when Richard called her. She was always warm with him, always his little girl. But when I answered the phone, her tone changed, cold, detached. It hurt more than I cared to admit. Till I didn't push. I told myself time would soften things. That if I just kept being kind, she'd see I wasn't trying to replace her mother. But years passed and nothing changed. Until one evening, Richard came home looking pale and tired. He handed me a letter, his lawyer's letter, to be exact. The cancer he'd kept hidden from me was terminal. I didn't want to worry you, he said, his voice trembling. And I didn't want Emily to see me like this. She's been through enough since her mother died. I remember feeling my knees weaken. My mind tried to grasp the words, but they scattered like leaves in the wind. Cancer. Terminal. 6 months, maybe less. The world dimmed around me. In the weeks that followed, Emily didn't visit. She sent flowers, cards, and messages through Richard's sister, but she never came. He didn't blame her. She's scared, he said softly one night as I helped him into bed. She can't bear to watch another parent fade away. But I blamed her. Not for her fear, but for abandoning him when he needed her most. When Richard passed away 2 months later, the house became a museum of memories. His glasses on the nightstand. His scent on the pillow. The sound of his laughter echoing faintly in my mind. I tried to call Emily, but she never answered. She didn't even come to the funeral. That broke something in me. In the attic, above the guest room, sat a box Richard had once told me never to open. It's just old things from before, he said. But after his death, curiosity mixed with grief and pulled me up those creaking stairs. Dust floated in the narrow beam of light from the small window. The box was heavier than I remembered. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, tied neatly with faded blue ribbon. One addressed to Emily. I read the first. Then the second. And before I knew it, tears were streaming down my face. They were love letters, not romantic ones, but letters from a father to a daughter he'd loved more than life itself. Letters he'd written every week during the years she'd been in therapy after her mother's death. Letters he never sent because she'd refused contact back then. Each letter was filled with gentle words of regret and hope. He told her he was proud of her, that he wished she'd forgive him for remarrying, that he never meant to make her feel replaced. By the 10th letter, I realized something else he had written about me. He wrote how I made him feel alive again, how he hoped Emily would one day see that I loved her too, even if she couldn't feel it yet. I sat there for hours, surrounded by pieces of his heart. And then I decided something. If Emily wouldn't come to me, I would bring these letters to her. But every time I picked up the phone, fear stopped me. What if she hung up? What if she thought I was intruding again? What if she blamed me for his death? So instead, I kept the letters. I placed them carefully back in the box, sealed it, and left it in the attic, the one place untouched by time. It became a secret I couldn't bear to destroy. And maybe, just maybe, I hoped that one day she'd come. That one day she'd climb those stairs herself and find what her father left behind. Till then, I waited. Years passed quietly. I kept busy with the garden, with volunteer work at the library. Life shrank into simple routines. Then last spring I got a message. It was short 5 words that made my heart stop. "Can we talk about Dad?" It was from Emily. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with memories, with the ache of old wounds. When the day finally came, I opened the door to see her standing there, older, thinner, her eyes guarded but softer than before. She didn't step inside. Not yet. Her gaze drifted past me, toward the living room. "It still smells like him," she whispered. "Yes," I said quietly. "I never changed anything." For a moment, we just stood there, surrounded by the ghosts of what we both lost. Then she asked, almost too softly to hear, "Why didn't you tell me he was dying?" I looked at her, my throat tightening. There were 100 things I could have said, but only one felt true. "Because he didn't want you to remember him that way." She turned away, wiping her eyes. And for the first time, I saw not resentment but pain. That was the moment I realized this wasn't anger anymore. It was grief. Grief that never healed because it was never shared. And in that silence, I knew what I had to do. I had to show her what was in the attic. I hesitated before mentioning the attic. Something about it felt sacred, almost forbidden. But as Emily stood there in the doorway, shifting from one foot to the other, her eyes glassy with things she wasn't ready to say, I felt the weight of those letters pressing against my conscience. "Would you like some tea?" I asked softly. It was a small piece offering something ordinary, something human. She nodded, following me into the kitchen. The air between us was fragile. Kind of silence that could break with one wrong word. She sat at the table, tracing her finger along the grain of the wood. "It's strange," she murmured. "I used to hate this kitchen. I thought it looked too perfect, too curated." I smiled faintly. "I just tried to make it warm." "I know," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I just wasn't ready to see anyone else in my mother's chair." Her honesty caught me off guard. It wasn't an accusation, it was grief dressed as memory. "I understand," I said. "I never wanted to take her place." She looked up at me then, eyes red but clear. "But you did, didn't you?" In his heart. I paused. Kettle whistled behind me. "I didn't replace her," I said, turning off the stove. "But I did love him. And I think that's what he wanted for both of us, to still have love even when everything else was gone." For the first time, she didn't look away. We drank in silence for a while. The house creaked softly, as if it remembered. And then she said something that made my breath catch. "I almost came to the funeral," she whispered. "I drove halfway here. But when I saw the church from the road, I couldn't go in." "Why?" "Because I thought I'd see you crying," she said. "And it would remind me that someone else got to say goodbye when I couldn't." I reached across the table, my fingers trembling slightly. "He wanted you there, Emily. Every single day until the end, he wished for that." She nodded, tears spilling freely now. "I know. I read his last letter." My heart froze. "His last letter?" She reached into her bag and pulled out a worn envelope. "He mailed it to me 2 days before he died. Just said, 'Forgive her if you can. She loves you more than you think.'" I didn't understand it then. I pressed my hand to my mouth, overwhelmed by the quiet power of his words. "That's why I came today," she continued. "I needed to know what he meant." I took a deep breath, my decision made. "Come with me," I said gently. We climbed the stairs together slowly, cautiously, as if we were approaching something sacred. Dust hung in the air, golden under the afternoon light. When we reached the attic door, I paused. "There's something here you should see," I said, pushing the door open. She looked around, her gaze scanning the room filled with boxes, old coats, and the faint smell of cedar. "What is this place?" "Your father used to come up here when he couldn't sleep," I said softly. He said it helped him think. Her eyes landed on the wooden chest in the corner. That was his, she whispered. Yes. And what's inside, it's yours now. I knelt beside the box, the wood cold beneath my fingers. For a moment, I hesitated. My hands trembled as I undid the latch and lifted the lid. Inside, neatly arranged, were the bundles of letters, the ones I'd found years ago, along with a few photographs and a small velvet box. Emily gasped. What is all this? I handed her the first bundle. Letters, I said. From him. To you. She stared at them as if they might vanish if she blinked. He wrote these? Yes. Every week for years. He never sent them because he didn't want to reopen your wounds. But he kept them here waiting. Her fingers brushed over the faded ribbon. Can I? Of course. She untied the first bundle, unfolding a yellowed page. Her father's handwriting, strong, looping, familiar, filled the page. I watched her read, her lips trembling, tears falling silently onto the paper. My dearest Emily, she read aloud in a shaking voice. If you ever wonder whether I loved you enough, I did. I always did. I just didn't know how to show it after your mother left us. I thought protecting you from pain meant keeping my distance. But I was wrong. She stopped, pressing the letter to her chest. He wrote this when I was 12, she whispered. I nodded. He never stopped writing. She continued reading in silence for several minutes, her expression shifting from pain to disbelief to a kind of quiet peace. Finally, she looked up at me, eyes glistening. Why didn't you tell me about this? I swallowed hard. Because I was afraid you'd think I was trying to use them to make you forgive me. I wanted you to come when you were ready. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. You kept them safe all this time? Yes, I said simply. Because he asked me to. Her breath caught. He did. I nodded. In his last week, he made me promise not to send them, not to force you. He said if you ever came back, I'd know when to show you. Emily sat back on her heels, clutching the letters as if they were her father's heartbeat. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The attic felt alive, filled with the echoes of his words, the quiet mercy of time finally catching up. Then she opened the small velvet box. Inside was a silver locket engraved with the initials R and E. He gave this to my mother, she whispered. Yes. He kept it with the letters. Said it belonged to both of you. She ran her thumb over the metal, then looked at me not with anger, not even sadness, but understanding. Thank you, she said softly. Those 2 words undid me. Every wall I'd built, every apology I'd rehearsed, every quiet prayer I'd whispered into the dark, all of it came rushing to the surface. I covered my mouth, sobbing quietly. Emily reached out and took my hand. For the first time, she held it. And for the first time, the silence in that house felt different. Not empty. Not haunted. Just still. Peacefully still. Downstairs, a gust of wind rattled the windows, and I thought maybe, just maybe, Richard was there too, watching as the 2 people he loved most finally found their way back to each other. For a while, we didn't move. Emily sat cross-legged on the wooden floor, the letters scattered like petals around her. The sunlight from the small window caught the dust, making it shimmer like something holy. She kept reading, sometimes smiling through tears, sometimes pausing to take deep breaths. I watched her carefully, afraid that saying too much might shatter this fragile calm we'd built. Then her fingers brushed against something at the bottom of the chest, a small, locked tin box I hadn't noticed before. Its metal was dull, the edges rusted, but the lock was still firm. What's this? She asked. I frowned. I don't know. I've never seen that before. We both stared at it, the air suddenly heavier. Emily tried to open it, but the lock didn't budge. There must be a key somewhere, she said. I looked through the chest, moving aside old envelopes and the velvet jewelry box. Nothing. But as I shifted the last layer of letters, something small clinked against the wood. A brass key tied with a thin piece of thread. It was hidden beneath a folded note. My breath caught as I recognized Richard's handwriting. For Emily when she's ready. Emily glanced at me, uncertain. Do you think? Open it, I whispered. She slid the key into the lock, turned it, and the box gave a soft click. Inside, wrapped in yellowed paper, was a photograph one I'd never seen before. It was Richard, much younger, standing beside a woman who wasn't his late wife. She was holding a baby. Emily froze. Who is that? I leaned closer. My stomach twisted. The woman wasn't familiar, but the child in her arms had Richard's eyes. There was another note beneath the photo, written in Richard's unmistakable handwriting. Emily, there's something I never found the courage to tell you. Long before I met your mother, I made mistakes. One of them was not being there for someone who needed me. I kept this part of my life hidden, thinking it would spare everyone pain. But secrets have a way of rotting what's left of us. The boy in this photo, his name was Samuel. He's your brother. Emily's breath hitched. What? The attic seemed to shrink around us. She read on, her voice trembling. Samuel's mother, Claire, passed away before I could make things right. I tried to find him, but she left no address, no family I could reach. I searched for years until I met your mother. I thought I could bury that chapter, but I never stopped wondering if he was alive. I kept this photo to remind myself of the price of silence. Her hands began to shake. He had another child. I reached toward her, but she flinched away, not out of anger, but confusion. I didn't know, I whispered. He never told me. Emily's eyes filled again. How could he keep this from me? From both of us? Maybe he wanted to protect you, I said softly. Or maybe he was ashamed. She looked down at the photograph again, tracing the child's tiny face with her fingertip. He said he searched for him, but he never found him? I shook my head. Not that I know of. For a moment, she didn't speak. The light shifted, falling across her face, highlighting the storm in her expression: shock, betrayal, grief, but something else too. Compassion. He must have carried this guilt for years, she murmured, all while pretending everything was fine. Your father was a good man, I said gently. But even good men have shadows. Emily nodded, swallowing hard. He must have written about this somewhere. Maybe one of the letters. Together, we began sifting through the stacks again. Halfway through the second bundle, we found it a letter written in unsteady script, near the end of his life. Emily, if you ever find this, I want you to know I've spent most of my life wishing for forgiveness, not from you or from your mother, but from a boy who never got to know his father. If you ever read these words, promise me something. Don't repeat my mistake. If there's someone in your life you've pushed away, find them. Tell them the truth while there's still time. By the time she finished reading, tears blurred her vision. She pressed the letter against her heart, her voice breaking. He wasn't just writing to me, was he? I shook my head. No. I think he was writing to himself. We sat there for a long while, letting the truth settle like dust after a storm. I could almost feel Richard in the room, not as a ghost, but as a presence that had finally unburdened itself. After a while, Emily turned to me. Do you think Samuel is still alive? I don't know, I said. But if he is, he deserves to know. She nodded, her expression resolute. Then I'm going to find him. Her voice carried a quiet strength, something her father would have recognized, that same stubborn hope that refused to fade even in grief. As she stood, clutching the photo, I realized something profound. The attic wasn't a place of secrets anymore. It had become a bridge between what was lost and what could still be found. Before leaving, Emily placed one of the letters back inside the chest. I'll return this one day, she said softly. When I've found him. Then she looked at me, and for the first time since the day I married her father, she smiled. Not the polite, distant smile she'd once used, but a small, real one that reached her eyes. "I understand now," she whispered. "Why you kept it all. You weren't holding on to the past, you were holding it safe." Her words struck deep, untying years of guilt inside me. "I just wanted to keep his love alive," I said quietly. "And you did," she replied. When she left that evening, the house didn't feel so still anymore. The air was lighter, the silence softer. I watched her car disappear down the road, the photograph and letters resting on the seat beside her, pieces of a story she was finally ready to continue. I turned back toward the attic stairs, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid to go up there again. The days after Emily's visit passed differently. The house no longer felt like a grave of memories. Felt alive again, though in a quieter way. Every creak in the hallway, every whisper of wind through the curtains carried a sense of release, as if Richard himself had finally exhaled. I kept thinking about what Emily said before she left, that she would find Samuel. I wasn't sure whether to hope or to fear it. Some secrets, once unearthed, change everything. But I also knew that Richard's story deserved its ending. A week later, she called. "I found something," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "Can I come over?" An hour later, she was standing at my doorstep again, clutching a stack of papers. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes determined. "I went through his old bank records, Mom's storage boxes, even the files from his law office," she said. "And look what I found." She laid the papers on the kitchen table. They were photocopies of adoption records, hospital notes, and an old letter from a social worker, all dated over 30 years ago. "He did find Samuel," she whispered. "But he never told anyone." I stared at her, my heart thudding. "What?" She nodded. "Look here." She pointed to the letter. It says, "Mr. Hale visited the agency to check on the welfare of his biological son. Due to confidentiality, only minimal information was shared. Child successfully placed with an adoptive family in Portland." I leaned against the counter, trying to absorb the words. "He knew where he was." Emily nodded. "He must have found out before he met you. Maybe even before I was born." The realization was heavy, layered with sadness and something that felt almost like betrayal, not for me, but for him. He'd carried this knowledge in silence. Not even his daughter, not even his wife, had known. "There's more," Emily said softly. "The social worker's letter was addressed to his office, but the return address is still active. I looked it up. The agency's been renamed, but it's still there." I called. "They said they can't give me details over the phone, but," she hesitated, "they said they could check if Samuel ever contacted them." I sat down slowly, my hands trembling. "And did he?" She looked up, her eyes wide and wet. "Yes. 2 years ago. He left a note saying if anyone from his biological family ever asked about him, to give them his information." My breath caught. "So he was looking for Richard." Emily nodded. But it was too late. Dad was already gone. We sat there in stunned silence, the enormity of it sinking in. Richard's son, Emily's brother, had been searching too. 2 paths that almost crossed but never did. "Did they tell you anything else?" I asked. She nodded again, sliding a folded paper toward me. "His name is Samuel Reed now. He's a teacher. He lives 3 hours from here." My throat tightened. A teacher? The detail hit me in a strange way. Richard had always admired teachers. He said they carried pieces of every life they touched. Felt poetic, almost as if life had quietly given Samuel the gift of giving what Richard never could. Emily was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant. "I want to meet him," she said finally. "But I don't know what to say. How do you tell someone they're the son of a man who's been gone for years?" I reached across the table and took her hand. "You tell him the truth, the kind that heals instead of hurts." She smiled faintly. "That sounds like something Dad would have said." I smiled too, blinking back tears. "Maybe it is." Over the next few days, Emily and I spoke often. For the first time, our conversations flowed easily, no tension, no careful pauses. We talked about Richard, about his laughter, his impossible optimism, even the silly way he hummed when he cooked. It felt like we were rebuilding something that should have existed all along. Then, one afternoon, Emily called again. "I've set up a meeting," she said quietly. "He agreed to see me." My heart skipped. "Samuel?" "Yes." He said he's known for years that he was adopted, but he never had any details, just a first name, Richard. He said he felt a connection even before knowing why. "When will you meet?" I asked. "Tomorrow," she said. "I'd like you to come with me." I froze. "Me?" "Yes," she said softly. "You were part of Dad's life. You're part of this story too." That night, I barely slept. My mind replayed every memory of Richard, the way he'd rest his head against my shoulder when he was tired, the sound of his laughter echoing through the halls, the nights we'd sit by the window talking about all the things we wished we could undo. If only he'd told us. If only he'd trusted that love, even imperfect, could survive truth. The next morning, the drive was quiet. Emily held the photograph in her lap, the one of Richard, the woman, and baby Samuel. When we arrived, she gripped my hand before we walked in. Cafe was small, cozy, filled with the soft murmur of voices and the clinking of cups. And then I saw him. Samuel. He was sitting by the window, sunlight outlining his hair in gold. He looked like Richard. The same jawline, the same thoughtful eyes. When he stood to greet us, my heart nearly stopped. "Emily," he said, his voice gentle, uncertain. She nodded, tears forming instantly. "You must be Samuel." He smiled, tentative kind. "I guess we have a lot to talk about." She handed him the photograph. His hand shook as he took it. "I've never seen this before," he whispered. "It was in his attic," she said. "He kept it all these years." Samuel swallowed hard, his eyes glistening. "So he never forgot." "No," she said softly. "Not for a single day." I stood silently, watching as the two of them leaned closer, voices trembling with emotion. In that moment, I felt something lift, a decades-old weight dissolving into light. Richard had left too many things unsaid, but somehow love had found its way back through the cracks. I stood near the cafe window, my hands wrapped around a warm cup I wasn't drinking. Outside, rain had begun to fall, soft and slow, as though the sky itself was listening. Emily and Samuel sat across from each other, two strangers bound by blood and loss. It was quiet at first, awkward in that delicate way beginnings often are. But then something shifted the moment Samuel began to speak. "I used to wonder what he was like," Samuel said. "I knew I was adopted, but no one ever told me much. Just that my birth mother loved someone she couldn't be with. I spent years trying not to care." He paused, looking down at the photo between them. "But I always did." Emily nodded, her voice trembling. "He thought about you every day. He wrote about you even when he didn't know where you were." Samuel's eyes softened. "I believe that. It's strange I didn't know him, but I've felt him all my life. Little things. The way I hum when I grade papers. How I talk to my students when they're hurting. I never knew why I did that. Maybe it's him." I smiled faintly. "It sounds like it." He turned to me then, really seeing me for the first time. "You were his wife?" "Yes," I said gently. "For nearly 20 years." He nodded slowly. "I'm glad he found someone who loved him." Kindness in his voice caught me off guard. Through all the secrecy, all the pain, I expected bitterness. But instead, he spoke with quiet grace, the kind that comes from understanding what loss really means. Emily reached across the table and placed the photograph beside his hand. "He wanted to tell you. He just didn't know how." Samuel exhaled deeply, his shoulders relaxing. "I think part of me already forgave him a long time ago." For a while we just sat there, three people, three lives woven together by the absence of one man. Then Samuel reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. Paper was worn, the ink slightly faded. "There's something you should both see," he said softly. He placed it on the table. My breath caught as I saw the handwriting. "Richard's." "I don't understand," Emily whispered. "Where did you get that?" Samuel hesitated. "It came in a package last year. From a lawyer in town. I didn't open it right away, I didn't think it could be real. But after we talked yesterday, I did. And I think it was meant for both of you." My hand shook as I lifted the envelope. On the front, Richard had written, "For the ones I couldn't say goodbye to." I looked at Samuel. "May I?" He nodded. I unfolded the letter, the edges soft from time. Richard's voice came alive in my mind with every word. "To my family, the one I lost and the one I found. If you're reading this, then I wasn't brave enough to say these things while I was alive. I've spent years hiding behind the idea that love means protecting people from the truth. I see now how wrong that was. Emily, my darling girl, you were my light after your mother's passing. Every day, I wanted to tell you that remarrying didn't mean forgetting her. It meant surviving her loss. You once told me you were afraid I'd stop loving you. I never did. Not for a single heartbeat. Samuel, my son, I barely knew. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope that the life you built was kind to you. I searched for you for years. I saw your name once in a school newsletter and felt proud, even though you didn't know me. If this letter ever reaches you, please know I did not forget you. Not ever. And to my wife, you gave me peace when I didn't think I deserved it. You kept my promises when I was gone. If love could take shape, it would look like the way you waited without asking for anything in return. I kept one secret, though not out of shame but because I didn't want you to feel burdened. In my final months, I found Samuel. I knew who he was. But by then, it was too late for me to go to him. So I wrote this letter, hoping that one day the three of you would find each other and in doing so, find me again. Don't grieve the years we lost. Celebrate the ones you still have. Richard. When I finished reading, no one spoke. The only sound was the rain outside, tapping gently against the glass. Emily was crying openly now, her shoulders shaking. Samuel had his head bowed, one hand covering his eyes. Finally, he looked up. "He did find me," he whispered. "He just didn't tell anyone." Emily reached for his hand, and for a moment I could almost see Richard there, in the way Samuel smiled through his tears, in the way Emily's voice softened, in the way forgiveness filled the space between us like sunlight after rain. "He wanted us to have this," Emily said. "To finish what he started." I nodded, clutching the letter to my chest. "Then let's not waste it." Samuel smiled small, hopeful. "I'd like that." We stayed there for hours, talking, laughing, crying, weaving together the fragments of a man who had loved all three of us in different ways. And though he was gone, I felt him more present than ever. When we finally stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The world smelled clean again, like something reborn. Emily turned to me as we walked to the car. "You know," she said, "Dad used to say life always gives you one last chance to say the things that matter." I smiled, holding her arm gently. Maybe this was his. As we drove away, I glanced back at the cafe window. For just a moment, I thought I saw him there, Richard, sitting by the glass, smiling softly as the morning light touched his face. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of what was lost. I felt gratitude for what was finally found. In the days after that meeting, something changed in all of us. The letter had done more than fill in the missing pieces. It had stitched three broken hearts together with threads of truth and forgiveness. Emily began visiting more often. Sometimes she'd come by after work, carrying fresh flowers for Richard's photo. Sometimes Samuel joined her, his quiet laughter echoing softly through the hallways that had once known only silence. It was strange at first, this new rhythm, this fragile peace we were learning to live in. but little by little it felt natural. The empty chair at the table didn't feel so empty anymore. One evening, about a month after our meeting, Emily found me in the garden, trimming the roses Richard had planted years ago. The sky was turning gold with the last light of day. "Do you ever go back up there?" she asked gently. "The attic." I looked up. "Sometimes. When I miss him too much." She smiled faintly. "Can I come with you?" We went inside, Samuel joining us a few minutes later. The three of us climbed the narrow stairs, each step creaking softly beneath our feet. The attic looked the same, the wooden chest, the soft dust, the pale sunlight sneaking through the small window. But somehow it didn't feel heavy anymore. Emily knelt beside the chest and opened it. The letters were still there, neatly bundled. She ran her fingers over the ribbons, then looked at me. "You said you used to come here when you missed him. What did you do?" "I talked to him," I said quietly. "Tell him things I never got to say." Samuel smiled softly. "Mind if we join you this time?" I shook my head, my eyes warming. He'd like that. We sat together on the floor, three souls connected by one man's love and his mistakes. Kind of family no one plans, but life insists on making anyway. Emily began to read aloud one of the letters Richard had written years ago, one I hadn't seen before. If love had a sound, it wouldn't be a shout or a song. It would be a whisper, the kind that lingers even when the room is quiet. Her voice trembled as she read. "He wrote this before I even forgave him." Samuel nodded. "It sounds like he was already forgiving himself." We all fell silent. There was something peaceful about the stillness, the way light danced on the old wood, the faint hum of wind against the roof. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small envelope I'd kept hidden for years. The last one he'd written to me. "I think it's time," I whispered. Emily and Samuel watched quietly as I opened it. Paper was delicate, the handwriting fading, but every word was still as alive as the day I found it. "My love, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. But please don't fill our home with silence. Let laughter live there again. Let kindness echo through those walls. I know you'll want to keep everything just as it was, my things, my chair, even my scent. But promise me this, when you're ready, put something new in the attic. Something that belongs to you. A sign that life went on. That you did too. My eyes blurred. I'd read it countless times, but never out loud. Emily reached over and squeezed my hand. "You kept everything he loved safe," she said softly. "Now it's time to add something of your own." I nodded, swallowing hard. "You're right." Samuel looked around, thoughtful. "What would you put here?" I stood, glancing at the room, the chest, the dust, the sunlight. Then I smiled faintly. "Something simple." I went downstairs and returned with a small box. Inside was a single photo taken at the cafe the day we met Samuel. The three of us, smiling through tears. For the first time, we'd all looked like family. I placed the photo gently on top of the letters, beside the one of Richard holding baby Samuel. 2 generations side by side. "There," I whispered. "Something new." Emily's tears fell silently as she brushed a hand across the photo. "He'd be proud of you," she said. "Of us," I corrected softly. We stayed there for a long while, not speaking, just being. The attic didn't feel like a place of secrets anymore, it felt like a sanctuary. Before leaving, Samuel turned toward the window where light was spilling in golden ribbons. "I think he's at peace now," he said. I smiled through my tears. "I think we all are." When we went back downstairs, the air in the house felt lighter than it ever had. Emily helped me in the kitchen while Samuel fixed a loose cabinet door. The sound of their laughter filled the space like sunlight after a long storm. That night, after they left, I stood in the doorway, looking at the stars. The world was quiet, not heavy, not hollow, but peaceful. And for the first time since Richard's passing, I whispered goodnight to him, not in grief, but in gratitude. I knew then that love doesn't end when someone leaves. It lingers, reshapes, finds new forms in memories and forgiveness in the laughter of those who remain. Later, before bed, I looked up toward the attic one last time. The photo we'd left up there, the one of us three, seemed to glow faintly in my mind. It wasn't just a symbol of what was found. It was a promise of what would continue. A new family born not from perfection but from grace. Time has a gentle way of softening sharp edges. Years passed quietly after that day in the attic. Emily married. Samuel became a godfather to her first child, and the house that had once felt so hollow began to breathe again. Laughter returned, not loud or constant, but steady and warm, like a heartbeat you can count on. Every Sunday, Emily and her family visited for dinner. Her daughter, Lily, would run through the halls chasing the sunlight, her little footsteps filling the air with joy. She had Richard's eyes, that same warm brown that held both curiosity and kindness. Sometimes, when she laughed, I'd close my eyes and hear echoes of him. I grew older, of course. My hands ached more, my steps slowed, but my heart somehow felt lighter. Peace has a way of doing that to a person. The attic became a sacred space, not of grief anymore, but of remembrance. We'd go up there every few months, dusting off the boxes, reading an old letter or two. Emily always said the attic felt like Richard's way of staying close. And maybe she was right. One afternoon, Lily, now about 8 years old, tugged on my sleeve. "Grandma," she said in her sweet, serious way, "Mommy said there's a secret room upstairs. Can I see it?" I smiled. "Ah, the attic." "Yes, you can. But only if you promise to be gentle. It's full of memories." She nodded solemnly, as if I'd given her a great responsibility. So together we climbed the stairs, her small hand tucked in mine. When we reached the attic, she gasped softly, "It's so quiet up here." "Yes," I said, smiling. "Quiet but not empty." She wandered around, curious eyes taking in every box, every photo frame. Then she saw the wooden chest. "Can I open it?" "Go ahead," I said gently. "But be careful." She lifted the lid, her eyes widening as she saw the letters, the faded ribbons, the old photographs. "Who are they?" she asked. "Your grandfather," I said, pointing at Richard's picture. "And your mother when she was a little girl. And that man, that's Samuel, your uncle." She tilted her head, processing this web of names and faces. "So everyone here loved each other?" I paused, then smiled. "Eventually, yes. It just took time." She ran her finger along the edge of a letter. "Did you love them too?" "With all my heart." She looked up at me, studying my face as if trying to read the lines time had written there. "Then why do you look sad?" I laughed softly. "Because love and sadness live together sometimes, sweetheart. The more you love, the more you miss. But that's how you know it mattered." Lily nodded, serious beyond her years. "Mommy says you keep secrets up here." I smiled. "Not anymore. Everything worth keeping is out in the open now." Still, her curiosity lingered. She explored every corner until she noticed a small wooden box on the windowsill, one even I hadn't looked inside for a while. It was mine. I had placed it there the year Richard died, and over time I'd almost forgotten what I'd written inside. "What's this one?" she asked, brushing off the dust. "That," I said softly, "belongs to you." She looked surprised. "To me?" I nodded. "Open it." Inside was a single letter, written in my handwriting, folded carefully. On the front I had written, "For whoever finds this attic full of love." Lily looked up at me, eyes wide. "Did you write it for me?" I smiled gently. I didn't know who it would be for back then. "But yes, I think it was always meant for you." She unfolded the paper and began to read aloud, her little voice clear and steady. "If you're reading this, it means our family's story has made it this far. This attic has held love, loss, and forgiveness in its walls for many years. Began as a place of secrets and ended as a place of truth. Whoever you are, remember this. Families are not built by blood alone, but by the courage to love again after being hurt. Every heart in this house carried regret once, but also hope. Hope that love would find its way back. If you ever feel alone, come here. Read these letters. They will remind you that even the ones we lose never really leave us. They live in our laughter, our memories, and in every kind thing we do for someone else. Leave something of your own here one day so that love keeps growing long after we're gone. With all my heart, Grandma. When she finished, Lily looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. That's so beautiful. I took her hand, my heart full. Do you understand what it means? She nodded slowly. That love never really ends. Yes, I whispered. Exactly. She reached into her pocket then, pulling out a small silver bracelet, the one her mother had given her on her birthday. Can I leave this here? I hesitated, then smiled. If you're sure. I want to, she said firmly. So the next person who comes will know we were happy. Her words hit me like sunlight breaking through clouds. Together, we placed the bracelet gently on top of the old photographs, a tiny circle of silver joining generations of stories. As we closed the chest, I felt something shift, not in the air but in my soul. The attic wasn't just a keeper of the past anymore. It had become a promise for the future. When we went back downstairs, Emily was waiting at the table, smiling as Lily ran into her arms, eager to share what she'd done. She left her bracelet in the attic, Emily said, looking at me. I nodded, smiling through tears. Just like her grandfather wanted something new. That night, as the house settled into its familiar quiet, I stood by the window looking up toward the attic. The moonlight spilled through the curtains, soft and golden. And for a brief, beautiful moment, I felt Richard there, not as a memory, but as part of the peace that filled this home. I whispered into the silence, you were right. Life did go on. And this time I knew it would. The house stood quiet again. It had been almost a year since Margaret, the woman Emily had once struggled to call stepmother, passed away peacefully in her sleep. Time had softened the grief, but not erased it. The house still carried her warmth, her voice lingering faintly in the creak of the floorboards, her laughter tucked between the walls. Emily hadn't been back since the funeral. She told herself it was too painful, that the memories would feel too heavy. But now, standing on the front porch with her daughter Lily, she knew it was time. Are you sure you're ready, Mom? Lily asked softly. Emily nodded, her eyes glistening. She wanted me to come. She left a letter with the lawyer, said I'd know when to open the door again. They stepped inside. The house smelled the same lavender and old books. Curtains fluttered gently in the spring breeze. Everything looked untouched, as though Margaret had simply gone out to the garden and might return any moment. Lily walked around, touching the framed photos on the wall. She really kept everything, she whispered. Yes, Emily said with a sad smile. She always said memories were her way of keeping love alive. They wandered through the rooms quietly until Emily's gaze drifted toward the ceiling. The attic. It had been years since they'd last gone up there, the day Lily left her little silver bracelet among the letters. Mom, Lily said softly, noticing her mother's stare. Do you think she left something there? I don't know, Emily said. But if she did, I think she'd want us to find it. The wooden stairs groaned under their weight as they climbed, the air growing cooler and stiller the higher they went. When Emily pushed open the attic door, sunlight poured in through the small window, illuminating the familiar space. The wooden chest sat where it always had, the same one that had held Richard's letters, the photographs, the pieces of a family rebuilt from silence and sorrow. But something was different now. A single envelope rested on top, cream-colored, sealed with a ribbon of faded blue. Emily's breath caught. Her fingers trembled as she lifted it. On the front, written in Margaret's careful handwriting, were the words, "For Emily and Lily when you come home again." Lily stepped closer. She knew we'd come. Emily nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. She always did. Together, they opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, written in that familiar, flowing script that carried the softness of Margaret's voice even from beyond the grave. My dearest Emily, my sweet Lily. If you're reading this, then I've joined him, the man who taught me how to love, and the little girl who taught me what love truly meant. I used to think this attic was a place for secrets. But now I know it was a place for beginnings. Every time someone opened that chest, something healed. Your father's heart, your pain, even mine. Emily, you once asked me if I ever felt like an intruder in your family. Truth is, I did. For many years. But the day you forgave me, you gave me something greater than belonging, you gave me peace. You became the daughter I never had, and I will carry that love with me wherever I am now. Lily, my little light. You reminded me that love doesn't end, it simply changes form. The day you left your bracelet here, you gave this attic its final gift, hope. Promise me you'll keep that alive, not in this house, but in the life you build. There's one more thing you should know. Chest holds a secret compartment beneath the lining at the bottom. Open it and you'll find something I left for you both. With love that never fades. Margaret. Emily's hand shook as she folded the letter. She exchanged a look with Lily, who was already kneeling beside the chest, her fingers tracing the edge of the wooden lining. She found the corner that lifted slightly and tugged. The false bottom came loose with a soft creak. Beneath it lay two things, a small velvet pouch and a thin, leather-bound book. Emily opened the pouch first. Inside was the silver bracelet Lily had left years ago, polished, gleaming, threaded now with a delicate gold chain. She fixed it, Lily whispered. Emily smiled through her tears. No, she made it stronger. Then Emily opened the book. Its first page was blank, but on the second Margaret had written, "This attic once held the stories of those who came before. Now it's yours to continue. Write your memories here. Write the love that carries you forward." The rest of the pages were empty, waiting. Lily touched the paper gently. Do you think she can still see us? Emily smiled faintly. If she's with Grandpa, then yes. And I think they're both smiling right now. The two sat together on the attic floor, reading Margaret's letter again, feeling the warmth of her love lingering like sunlight in the air. After a while, Lily reached for a pen. Can I write something? Emily nodded, handing it to her. Lily bent over the first blank page and wrote carefully. Dear Grandma and Grandpa, thank you for teaching us that love never ends, it just changes homes. When she finished, Emily added her own words below. And thank you for giving us this one. She closed the book gently, setting it beside the letters and the photos, 3 generations bound by ink, memory, and forgiveness. As they left the attic, Emily turned for one last look. The sunlight had shifted, spilling across the chest, the bracelet glinting softly like a quiet heartbeat. And in that stillness, she felt at the peace of knowing every secret had been spoken, every wound had found its balm, every love had finally come full circle. Downstairs, the air smelled like spring. The roses in the garden were blooming again. Lily slipped her hand into her mother's and whispered, Can we come back every year? Emily smiled. Yes, sweetheart. Every year, so we never forget. As they walked out into the golden light, the attic door above them creaked softly in the wind, as if the house itself was saying goodbye or perhaps simply thank you. The house looks smaller now. I suppose everything from childhood does when you return to it as an adult. The garden isn't as wide, the steps aren't as steep, and even the sky above the roof seems closer, more intimate. But the feeling is exactly the same. It's been 20 years since I last walked through this door. 20 years since I climbed those creaking attic stairs with Grandma Margaret's hand in mine. I'm 30 now. Teacher like Uncle Samuel once was. Funny how life echoes itself. I built my own home, my own life, but this house, this attic, has always called to me. Mom passed away last spring. Peacefully like Grandma did. Her last words to me were simple. Go home, Lily. There's one more thing waiting for you. And so I came. Key turned stiffly in the lock, but when I pushed the door open, the familiar scent of lavender greeted me, faint but still there. Dust floated lazily in the afternoon light. Everything felt untouched, yet deeply alive, as if time had been waiting for me to arrive. I wandered through the room slowly, tracing my fingers along the furniture, the old photos. There was one of all of us: Grandpa Richard, Grandma Margaret, Mom, Uncle Samuel, and me, just a child with pigtails and scraped knees. I smiled. "You kept us together," I whispered. "All of you did." Then I looked toward the ceiling. The attic door. My chest tightened with something between nostalgia and reverence. When I climbed those stairs, every step seemed to carry a heartbeat, not just mine, but theirs. The ones who came before me. The attic door creaked softly as I pushed it open. The sunlight was warm, pouring in through the small round window, landing directly on the wooden chest that had outlasted everyone who once sat before it. It was still there. The same chest that once held Grandpa's letters, Grandma's secrets, and my bracelet, now a family heirloom of emotion. I knelt beside it and brushed the dust off the lid. My reflection appeared faintly in the polished metal latch. "I'm here," I whispered. Inside, everything was just as I remembered: the letters tied with blue ribbon, the faded photographs, the journal that Grandma left for me and Mom. Its pages, yellowed with time, were filled with handwriting from 3 generations. Grandpa's careful pen strokes. Grandma's gentle looping script. Mom's steady, deliberate lines. Each of them had written to the next, passing on wisdom like a flame that never burned out. I turned to the last page. It was Mom's final entry, written the year before she died. "Lily, my darling girl, if you ever read this, I hope you understand now what this attic truly means. It isn't a place of sorrow. It's where love learned to forgive itself. One day you'll have your own story to tell. And when you do, leave it here. So this house keeps breathing. So love keeps finding its way home." Tears blurred my vision. I pressed the page against my chest, breathing in the scent of the old paper, that faint trace of rose and dust, like time itself had a fragrance. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small box I'd brought with me. Inside was the same silver and gold bracelet Grandma had fixed, now polished to a soft shine. And beside it, a folded letter of my own. I placed them on the floor before me and began to write one last page in the book. My handwriting trembled at first, but then steadied. "To whoever finds this attic next. You don't know me, but that's all right. We're connected anyway. This house has seen more love than most people feel in a lifetime. It has carried pain, forgiveness, laughter, and peace. It has watched families fall apart and find their way back again. My grandparents, Richard and Margaret, taught me that silence can hold love if you listen closely enough. My mother, Emily, taught me that forgiveness is not forgetting, it's remembering with compassion. And now I've learned my own truth. Love isn't meant to stay locked away, even in a chest full of memories. It's meant to move, to grow, to pass on. So if you're standing here now, reading this, don't just keep the story. Add to it. Leave something of your own, so love keeps echoing long after all of us are gone." I closed the book gently, placed my letter inside the chest, and set the bracelet on top, the same spot where Grandma had once left it for me. As I did, a soft breeze drifted through the attic window, fluttering the edges of the letters. Felt like a whisper, like someone saying thank you. I smiled, tears falling freely now. "You're welcome," I whispered back. Before leaving, I looked around the attic one last time. The sunlight painted everything gold: the letters, the photos, the dust motes swirling like tiny pieces of memory. Didn't feel like a place of ghosts anymore. Felt alive, sacred, eternal. Quiet testament to what love leaves behind when words run out. I walked to the window and opened it, letting the fresh air in. The garden below was overgrown, wild with roses. Their scent drifted up, filling the room with the smell of life. I took a deep breath and said softly, "Goodbye, Grandma." "Goodbye, Grandpa." "Goodbye, Mom." Then I added, "Thank you for teaching me how to stay." When I descended the attic stairs for the last time, I left the door slightly ajar, the same way Grandma always did. She used to say it was so love could find its way back in. Outside, the sun was setting, bathing the house in golden light. I turned once more to look at it, the home that had held generations of laughter, loss, and forgiveness. And as I walked away, I realized something beautiful. The attic wasn't just a room anymore. It was a living story, one that would never truly end. The realtor had called it a house with history. But to the young couple standing at the foot of the winding staircase, it was simply home. Paint was chipped, the wallpaper faded, but the house had a strange kind of warmth, the kind that can't be built, only inherited. The husband, Daniel, ran his fingers along the wooden banister and smiled. "It feels lived in," he said. His wife, Claire, nodded. "It feels like someone loved it deeply." They spent the afternoon unpacking boxes, laughing about the creaky floorboards and the stubborn windows that wouldn't open all the way. By evening, as the sunset poured amber light through the living room, Claire wandered upstairs. That's when she noticed a narrow door near the end of the hallway. "The attic," she murmured, brushing away the cobwebs. Took effort to pry the old door open. The hinges groaned, protesting, but then gave way, and with it came a rush of air heavy with the scent of cedar, dust, and something faintly floral. Sunlight spilled through a small round window, landing directly on a wooden chest. She hesitated before stepping inside. The room was peaceful, almost reverent, like stepping into a memory that wasn't hers. Daniel's voice called from below. "You found something?" "Yeah," she said softly. "Come up here." He climbed the stairs, brushing dust from his hands. "Wow, looks ancient." Claire knelt beside the chest. "Do you think it's okay to open it?" He shrugged. "It's part of the house now." The latch clicked open easily, as if it had been waiting. Inside, neatly arranged and untouched by time, were stacks of letters tied with ribbons, photographs, and a small leather-bound book. Claire picked up the book first. On the inside cover, written in faded ink, was a single line. "To whoever finds this attic next, this house carries love. Keep it safe." Her fingers trembled as she turned the page. There were letters, drawings, little notes from decades past. Some were dated in the 1980s, others even earlier. Daniel leaned over her shoulder, reading silently. "These look like family messages?" She nodded slowly. "I think so. Look, here's a name." She pointed to a page signed Lily. Below it, in elegant cursive, another name, Margaret. They spent the next hour reading stories of love, loss, forgiveness. Letters from a husband to his daughter, from a wife to her stepchild, from a grandmother to a little girl. It was like unfolding a life piece by piece, strangers becoming family through words. By the time Claire reached the last entry, tears were rolling down her cheeks. "Love doesn't die when we do. It lingers in the walls that hurt our laughter, in the things we leave behind, and in the hearts brave enough to listen." She closed the book gently. "Daniel," she whispered, "we can't just leave this up here." He smiled softly. "No, but maybe we don't need to take it down either. Maybe it belongs here." Claire nodded, her voice trembling. "Then we'll keep it safe." Before closing the chest, she noticed something glinting beneath the book, a silver and gold bracelet, delicate and beautiful. She held it in her palm, feeling its weight, its warmth. "It's so old," she murmured. Daniel looked at it thoughtfully. "Maybe it belonged to one of them." She smiled faintly. "Or maybe it belonged to all of them." That night, as rain pattered softly against the roof, Claire couldn't stop thinking about the attic. About the people who had once lived here, the ones whose words still lingered in that quiet space. She got out of bed, tiptoed upstairs, and sat on the attic floor with the chest open in front of her. She pulled a notebook from her bag and began to write. "We found your home today. It's beautiful. There's something in these walls, something that feels like peace. Whoever you are, wherever you are, thank you for leaving your love behind. We promise to fill this place with laughter again." When she finished, she folded the note and slipped it into the chest, right beside the bracelet. Then she looked around the room, smiling through the gentle flicker of candlelight. For a moment, she thought she heard a soft sigh, almost like approval, as if the house itself had taken a deep breath after years of silence. The next morning, Daniel found her there, asleep against the chest, the candle long gone out. "Couldn't stay away?" he teased. She smiled sleepily. "I think this house wanted company." From that day forward, the attic became part of their lives. Place of quiet reading, of reflection, of gratitude. They never changed it, never painted the walls or replaced the old chest. Years later, when their own children asked why they kept the dusty old room, Claire would smile and say, "Because it remembers love better than anyone else ever could." And sometimes, on quiet evenings, she'd climb the stairs alone, open the chest, and run her fingers along the faded pages, the ones signed by Richard, Margaret, Emily, and Lily. She didn't know their faces, but she knew their hearts. And in that attic filled with letters, she felt it, the pulse of generations, the echo of forgiveness, the quiet truth that love outlives us all. Years later still, when the house changed hands once again, a new family moved in. They found the chest just as it had always been and added something new, a small photograph of themselves, smiling, arms around each other. Below it, they wrote one simple line: "We were here too." And yes, love still lives here. And so it continued through decades, through hands and hearts and laughter and tears. The attic never lost its warmth. The letters never lost their meaning. And the story, the one that began with a woman keeping her husband's letters in secret, became something larger than any of them could have imagined. 'Cause love, once written, never truly ends. It only waits to be read again. There are houses that hold people, and then there are houses that hold stories. This one, standing quietly at the end of a tree-lined road, had long ago stopped being just wood and brick. It had become a keeper of hearts, a silent witness to the kind of love that does not end, only changes form. The attic, once a place of secrets, had become the heart of it all. Dust gathered on its beams, yes, but the air there was never still. It hummed softly with memory, like an old song that refuses to fade. If you stood there long enough, you could almost hear them. Margaret's gentle laughter, Emily's steady voice reading her father's letters aloud, little Lily's gasp of wonder when she found the chest for the first time, and maybe even Richard's quiet sigh, that sound of a man finally forgiven. Over time, the house weathered storms, repairs, and the passage of countless seasons. Paint faded, floors aged, but the attic remained untouched. Every family that came after added something small, a photo, a note, a trinket, but no one ever took anything away. Each new generation felt it, though none could quite explain it. A sense of warmth that had nothing to do with sunlight. A peace that seemed to come from the walls themselves. One spring morning, long after even Claire and Daniel had gone, a young woman named Isla moved in. She was an artist, quiet, observant, always sketching the way light fell on old things. The first time she went up to the attic, she meant only to find space for her canvases. But what she found instead stopped her cold. The chest. The letters. The bracelet tarnished but still gleaming. And the journal filled to its final page. She sat cross-legged on the floor, her fingers trembling as she turned the pages. She read names she'd never heard before: Richard, Margaret, Emily, Lily, in words written decades apart, yet bound by the same thread: forgiveness. Isla stayed up there until nightfall, the golden light fading into silver moonlight. She didn't understand how strangers' words could make her cry, but they did. There was something in them that reached beyond time, something deeply human. When she closed the journal, she noticed an empty space near the back, one last blank page tucked against the cover. Almost like it had been left waiting. She smiled. "All right then," she whispered. "My turn." She pulled a small notebook from her bag, tore out a clean sheet, and began to write. "To all of you whose words fill this room. I don't know your faces, but I know your love. I can feel it in the air, in the way this house sighs when I breathe. I came here alone, searching for peace. I think I found it. I've always believed that art is just another way of remembering. And this attic, it's the most beautiful artwork I've ever seen. Thank you for leaving traces of yourselves behind. Thank you for reminding me that love doesn't need witnesses to be real. She folded the page carefully and placed it in the chest beside the others. Then she added something new, a small charcoal sketch she'd made of the attic itself, with light streaming through the window and the chest at its center. Underneath, she wrote one line. Light never forgets where it's been. Before she left, she stood for a long moment, watching the way the light filtered through the dust. Particles shimmered like tiny souls, suspended in the air, not gone, not forgotten, just resting. Downstairs, the house was quiet. But in that quiet, there was comfort. When Isla left years later, she took nothing with her. She told the next owners, "Keep the attic door open. It's better that way." And they did. Every family that followed somehow knew this house wasn't just theirs. It belonged to the ones who had loved before and to the ones who would love after. Children grew up chasing shadows of laughter they couldn't quite place. Couples sat by the window, holding hands without knowing why it felt sacred. And sometimes, in the stillness of night, someone would swear they heard faint voices reading letters aloud in the attic. Not ghosts. Just love finding its voice again. Years blurred into decades. The world outside changed, technology, cities, the pace of life, but inside the attic, time moved gently. One afternoon, a little girl with curls and curious eyes opened the chest again. She couldn't read yet, but she held one of the letters carefully in her small hands, tracing the ink with her fingers. She looked up at her mother. "What's this, Mommy?" Her mother smiled. "It's where love lives." The child tilted her head. "Can I leave something too?" Her mother nodded. "Someday, when you have your own story." The girl thought for a moment, then took a hair ribbon from her pocket and placed it inside the chest. "Just in case," she whispered. And somewhere in the quiet, in the dust, in the golden beam of light that cut across the floor, it almost felt like the house smiled. The attic had come full circle. What began as a secret between a grieving wife and her husband's daughter had become a living legacy, an endless conversation carried through generations. Not about loss, not about regret, but about the courage it takes to love again. And as the sun dipped low, washing the walls in gold, the house settled into its familiar, eternal stillness, a stillness that wasn't absence but presence. A silence filled not with emptiness, but with memory. A silence that whispered, softly and forever, "Love lives here." The attic is quiet again. Not the empty kind of quiet, the kind that hums softly, like the pause between heartbeats. Kind that says everything has already been spoken, and now it's time to rest. Sunlight spills through the round window, falling gently across the old wooden chest. The brass latch glints faintly in the light, the air warm and still. Dust dances in soft spirals, moving as if guided by invisible hands. And if you listen closely, really listen, you can still hear them. The echoes of voices carried through generations. A man who loved deeply but feared the truth. A woman who learned that forgiveness is a language all its own. A daughter who turned anger into understanding. A child who found wonder in grief. And a home that kept it all safe. Every family that entered this place left something of themselves behind, a word, a whisper, a memory. Each became a verse in the same long poem of love and healing. Now, after more than a century, the house has grown wise. It doesn't cry when someone leaves. Simply opens its windows to the wind, letting love drift through the rooms like breath. If the walls could speak, they would tell you this story from the beginning. They would tell you about Richard Hale, the man who built this home with hands steady enough to raise its beams, but not his own heart. He believed love could be protected by silence. He was wrong. But his mistakes became seeds, small, painful truths that would one day bloom into forgiveness. They would tell you about Margaret, the woman who came after, whose gentleness turned grief into peace. She found his letters, yes, but more importantly, she found her own strength in keeping them safe. She learned that loving someone means holding both their light and their shadow. They would tell you about Emily, the daughter who carried her father's ghost until she was brave enough to forgive him. She learned that forgiveness isn't a gift we give the dead. It's the key we use to free the living. And they would tell you about Lily, the child whose curiosity turned legacy into renewal. The one who left her bracelet in the chest and promised to keep the story alive. Chuan added something. Chuan repaired what the last had broken. And together they turned a secret attic into a sanctuary of love. But there's one voice the walls remember most clearly, the one that started it all. It's faint, but if you lean close, you can still hear him. Richard's voice, soft as a prayer. If love had a shape, he once wrote, it would be a circle, no beginning, no end, just the endless return of what we give away. It was his final note, hidden in a small pocket of the chest, sealed away and only found long after everyone else had gone. His words were written not to one person, but to all of them, to every hand that would one day touch what he left behind. To those who come after me. I built this house for my daughter, but it became a home for all who would love her after I'm gone. I filled it with silence, thinking that would protect her. But silence cannot keep love safe, only truth can. If you ever find yourself in this attic, remember that love is not measured by what we hold on to, but by what we set free. You are not here by accident. This story found you because it wanted to continue. So when you leave something kind behind, a word, a memory, a promise, so that love keeps moving forward as it was always meant to. Paper was thin, nearly translucent, but the ink had not faded. When Isla, the artist who came 100 years later, found that final page, she read it aloud to an empty attic. And though she stood there alone, she felt surrounded. She swore the air shimmered with warmth. It wasn't imagination. It was memory alive and awake. She folded the letter gently, placed it back inside the chest, and whispered, "You kept your promise, Richard." It never stopped. Then she closed the lid. The house sighed a long, contented breath that rippled softly through its walls. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing against the window panes. The garden below, once planted by Margaret, tended by Emily, and later restored by Lily, swayed in golden light. Roses bloomed again, their petals opening to the sun. And for a fleeting moment, every story ever told within those walls seemed to exist all at once. Margaret's hand brushing the dust from Richard's letters. Emily's tears falling on words she thought she'd never forgive. Lily's laughter echoing like music between the rafters. Isla's charcoal sketch of the sunlight falling just so. And countless others, strangers, families, children yet to be born, all connected by a single truth. Love does not end. It evolves. Changes its face, its name, its form, but it never dies. The attic would see more families come and go. It would age, yes. The wood would darken, the nails rust. But the story would never fade. Because somewhere in the quiet, someone would always find that chest, open it, and add one more word to the great conversation that had outlived them all. Perhaps that is the real magic of it, not the people, not even the letters, but the act of continuing. Of saying, I was here too. And I loved. One day, when the house is finally empty again, when its walls are cracked and the roof lets in the rain, the chest will remain. Someone, maybe long after memory has forgotten names, will find it under the dust. They'll open it, expecting trinkets. But instead, they'll find a century's worth of love, folded carefully in paper and ink. They'll read the words aloud, and even if they don't understand all the names, they'll feel the meaning. 'Cause love, written with truth, never needs translation. Maybe they'll write something too. Maybe not. But before they leave, they'll look around, smile faintly, and whisper, "Love lives here." And somewhere, wherever they are now, Richard and Margaret will hear it. Emily and Lily will hear it. The house will hear it. And once more, light will fall through the window, turning the dust into stars. Prologue: the circle. When Richard first built this house, he planted a rose bush beneath the window, one for his late wife, and one for the daughter she left behind. When Margaret took over the garden, she planted a third for him. Emily added a fourth when she forgave them both. Lily added a fifth when she became a mother. And Isla, the artist, planted one last rose, not for anyone she'd lost, but for those she'd yet to meet. Now, even after all the names have faded from memory, the roses remain a circle of red and white, blooming faithfully each spring, petals falling softly onto the earth that has known so much love. If you walk past the old house one evening when the wind is still, you might smell them. And if you look closely through the attic window, you'll see a faint light, a small, steady glow that never quite goes out. Some say it's the sun. Some say it's reflection. But those who know better will tell you. It's love. Still alive. Still waiting. Still whispering through the quiet. Love lives here,